Hello, everyone. We now welcome Molly Tebow to the stage. Molly is a librarian at the State Library of WA. Her professional interests include e-learning, open data, and the use of open source software in GLAM organisations and inclusive approaches to digital literacy. Molly is sharing a project she and Tricia McKenzie, who can't join us today, worked on during lockdown. They worked on developing a suite of educational resources using the open source platform Omeka. Importantly, Molly will show us that Omeka is quite friendly, even for less technical users, and can be used to enhance the online offerings of GLAM organisations of all sizes. Molly, over to you.
Thanks, Bonnie. My name's Molly, and I'm an e-learning librarian at the State Library of WA. The purpose of this presentation today is to take you through the work that Trish and I have done to develop online learning resources for the State Library of WA using the Omeka platform. Kaya, Nyani Wajak Nunga Buja Yagani. The State Library of Western Australia is on the land of the Wajak Noongar people, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Western Australia, their continuing connection to land and culture. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you. So this is me and Trish. I'm a librarian, Trish is a teacher, and we've worked pretty closely together on this project and other projects. And one really good benefit of working for a large cultural institution is that librarians and teachers can collaborate closely, bring together complementary skill sets, and work on things like this. And Trish today is in Margaret River visiting some wineries, so she couldn't join us, unfortunately. Okay. When we're working on projects like this, we do look at the strategic directions of the State Library. And these are some of the specific points that we use to think about when we're developing things. Specifically looking at collections in digital forms as well as the traditional forms, looking at digital services and transformation. And when we look at lifelong literacy, we're not just talking about reading and writing, we're also talking about digital literacy, and that's increasingly a focus at the State Library. So at the State Library, we collect a variety of historical materials. People think about books and newspapers, but we also have a fantastic map collection, a big collection of photographs, which we've been digitising. We've got letters, we've got oral histories, we've got ephemera. So when you go to vote and you get handed all of those how to vote cards, we actually collect those and keep them in our archives. So we've got a pretty rich collection. And we can do all kinds of fun things with those. Okay. So Trish is an education officer at the State Library. We have a number of education officers at the State Library, and they deliver a range of services that are aimed at school students and teachers. School groups can actually come into the State Library and have guided workshops run for free. There's self-guided tours, there's exhibition activities and online resources like the ones that I'm talking about today. When we shut down for COVID, we had already started working on some of these projects, but it gave us the time to really focus on them a lot more, which was just fantastic timing from our point of view. So these Omeka projects can be used independently online, like when students are learning from home, but when they come back into the library, they can fit seamlessly with the excursions and the exhibitions that we offer. So they provide fantastic deep engagement. All right, let's talk about the tool, Omeka S. So Omeka is a free open source content management program. We love that. And the really nice thing about it is that it was developed for GLAM organisations by GLAM organisations. So the development started in 2007 and it was developed by the Roy Rosenwig Centre for History and New Media. And their aim was to help libraries, museums, archives to publish and display collections of digital material in a rich, in-depth form. Nice thing about it is it's underpinned by Dublin Core metadata. One drawback to original Omeka is that every time you want to create a new site, you have to install a new instance. So in 2017, they released Omeka S, which is a system where you can do a single installation and then you can build multiple sites on that installation. That's the system we use. That's the system that most larger institutions use. Omeka S is lightweight, it's modular, it's pretty friendly to use. It's responsive, so you can use it on all kinds of devices to a degree. It's pretty accessible. And it's also been translated into several languages, and they've got ongoing translation projects. Omeka S uses JSON LD as its native data format, and it includes a number of different vocabularies, which I'll talk about a bit later. And you can add your own. So that's one of the really nice things about it, is you can update it in a variety of ways. It includes an API and the ability to install modules which extend the system. You can write your own modules. The latest version is Omeka 3, which we installed literally last week. So it's always being updated. Who else uses it? Quite a lot of people use it. Here is some of my favorites. So GLAM organizations, other local organizations use it, both locally and internationally. One really interesting thing about this for me is that there's a real social justice theme in a lot of the Omeka sites that are out there. My personal favorite is this US Department of Agriculture offering Frost on Chickens. It's actually about contributions that the poet Robert Frost made to poultry farming, surprisingly, which is just kind of adorable. Many organizations also have some really useful documentation online. So shout out to University of Tasmania and Yale University. They share a lot of their user guides online. And when you're trying to come up with your own, that's just really, really helpful as well. So these are the sorts of things that make open source software just a pleasure to use. If you're developing your own guides, these are there for you to work from. So at the State Library, the first Omeka site built was a mining and energy archive. The first site that Trish and I worked on together was the WA Migration Stories site, which is this one that I'm showing now. This was designed to extend the Suitcases Stories of Migration guided workshop that the education officers run. We launched it in February 2020 and received a lot of positive feedback from teachers and educators in other GLAM organisations. So that was great. Then we just started working on something else and lockdown hit. And this is where the last talk by Mike is really relevant. We're probably not the only ones. We've got some pretty old and ugly small sites that hang off our website. This is one of them, Western Australia and Federation. This original site was designed in 2000, and you can tell by looking at it. It's very, very dated in the way that it looks, but it does have a lot of useful information, some of which you can't really find elsewhere. And in fact, we found some of the Wikipedia pages on the topic link back to this site, which is a bit scary. We thought that there was a pretty good chance that this could get taken down and archived. So we wanted to make use of the research that had gone into it. Western Australia and Federation is a Year 6 history topic in WA. So we thought we can take that and put it into a new format. And that is what we did. So I'm actually going to switch and show you a demo now of this site itself. So we migrated content onto the Omeka platform. We updated quite a bit of it, and we made some minor changes to make the text age appropriate and culturally appropriate. It reuses the original research and the original collection items, but we've included a whole bunch of extra metadata and tighter links to the catalogue. It's a better fit now for the WA curriculum, which is the beauty of working with teachers, is that they know about all that stuff. And we've added a bunch of extra stuff, and I'll show you some of that. So this is the front page. Nice thing about these Amika sites is that there's a bunch of ways you can navigate. You can look at the different events, you can look at the people. We've got a timeline that I will show you. So it's quite interactive in how you can navigate around it. And one of the really cool things about working on these sites was the opportunity to work with Aboriginal members of staff who undertook cultural review of this site and the other sites as well. The aim is to make them safer and more inclusive for Aboriginal people, and reflecting on the cultural biases that are sort of underpin the collections, I suppose. That's something that we're trying to be more mindful of. One thing that was really fantastic from my point of view was that one staff member I worked with on it posed questions for me and made suggestions rather than just rewriting the content. And that gave me a chance to reflect more deeply and develop a better understanding, which makes me better in future at doing this kind of work and understanding the perspectives better, so that we can look at how some of these historical events do cause ongoing pain to Aboriginal people. That was really pretty key. When this went up for review by our director, I was wondering if we were going to hear back about this at all. And to my delight, our director actually highlighted this work and commended it as an example to other library staff about the sorts of things that we should be doing more broadly. So that was really fantastic. Okay, let's have a look at the timeline. So just take a minute to load. So this timeline, it's quite a fun feature. And you can see down the bottom, it's got the dates, and you can click through and it just has these pictures that it's pulling out, little bits of information, and it's linking through to the pages as well. This uses Timeline.js, which is another open source tool. And it's actually very, very simple to use. It just uses a Google spreadsheet for the pictures and information in this, and the ability for Amika to have iframe code in the HTML boxes. So it looks really cool, really simple to do, which is really, really nice. Let's have a look at one of the pages just to give you a bit of an example. John Forrest. So a standard page in Amika includes photographs, text for information. Scroll down, we've got some questions that students can think about, keywords and links to other pages. Then we've got the items, and these are essentially digitized collection material. Let's have a look at one of them. So this is an example of a digitized photograph with attached metadata. We've got things like unique identifiers, link to our catalogue page, a whole bunch of different information. And I'll show you another example. This one here is a digitized newspaper, and this was actually taken from Trove, and it's got the Trove metadata, including the text, the corrected text in here as well, and a link through to Trove. How we went about doing this was we made use of the fantastic Glam Workbench. So hopefully all of you know Tim Sherratt and his wonderful Glam Workbench tools. I use them wherever I can. And in particular, this one used a Jupyter notebook to save Trove newspaper articles as images, which is much nicer than the native way that Trove saves them. Gives a much better result. Now, Tim does also have another Jupyter notebook that allows for import of Trove newspaper articles using the Amika API. I had to play with it, but couldn't get it working. The Amika API does seem to be a little bit tricky, challenging to use sometimes, a bit picky. And that's something that we can work on in future, but something else to be aware of. Now, I'm just going to take you for a bit of a behind the scenes look. Let's go to one of the pages. And I'm already signed in. So I can just click edit. So you can see behind the scenes, Omeka is really modular. It's just got HTML blocks. It's got blocks for items. If you want to add new blocks, they're over here to the right. And yeah, pretty simple to use. There are some details that are hidden in submenus, but you do get to know that pretty well. It's fairly easy to teach people how to use this. Okay, so I mentioned that Omeka S, you can hang multiple sites off. So here's an example of that. These are the sites we've got going at the moment. Some of these are live, others are in production. Where they've got a little closed eye, those ones in particular, they're not viewable yet. They're being worked on. And they can be owned by different owners who are either global admin or site admin. Modules. These are the add-ons that you can add to your Omeka install. There's all kinds of different things that you can add on. Particularly great one is the mapping module, which we use in the WA migration stories. And that allows you to geolocate items and add interactive maps with the items on them to Omeka pages. That's pretty nifty. And the items themselves, these are the digital objects that underpin Omeka. So for the most part, in our case, they're digitized photographs, but they can be PDF files, they can be audio files, video files, all sorts of different things. Items have media attached, the media being the actual files themselves, but you can have an item with no media, such as a newspaper title, but you can't have media without an item. Items can be saved into sets. One item can be in numerous sets. We use sets to restrict the view within our particular sites. So if you hit browse inside our Federation site, you'll only see items in our Federation set, because teddy bears, for example, aren't so relevant to Federation. So, but they can be shared across different sites as well, which is quite a nice feature some of the time. Vocabularies I mentioned earlier, most of these come pre-installed into Omeka. They're already there. We added schema.org for a few things that we wanted as well. So it allows you to extend it to make it more relevant for your usage, I suppose. Same deal with resource templates. What these are is they're a predefined set of properties that you use when you create new items. So when we started off, we were using base resource when we were creating new items. But after a while, we looked at it and went, it might be a good idea to make our own. And I think it was University of Tasmania, what they were doing that prompted that. So we created our own resource template called SLWA Trove. And I'm going to just jump back here and pop back in. So this shows you the SLWA Trove resource template is pretty cool because it maps directly to our catalogue, and that means it's just easier and more accurate to copy things to and forth. You're not having to hunt all over the place. It just makes it a little bit easier, and it controls what we definitely want, so mandatory things and things that are optional. It's just a nice way to make it sort of more custom for us. Now, Omeka, like a lot of open source software, has pretty good documentation online. There's a user manual, there's a developer manual, and there's also forums online. So if you're looking for help or you want more information about something, there's a fair bit out there, and mostly kept reasonably up to date as well. So challenges, here you go. I had to add an XKCD just for Mike. This was last minute addition. We have had some challenges along the way. Some of the error messages that Omeka throws aren't as helpful as they could be. I think that's probably a common issue with a lot of technical things, especially when it comes to database errors. Sometimes they're just, it can be a bit hard to figure out what's going on. We have had a bit of trouble with the API. We've got some things to work, but it doesn't always work as per the documentation, and the documentation is also a little bit sparse about that. And there's not as much troubleshooting help there as I would have liked personally. Same with the bulk upload. The bulk upload fails pretty readily, which I suppose is a good thing in a lot of ways, but it makes it a bit challenging to do a lot with it, I suppose. And as with many open source software, the additional modules, some of them are fantastic and others you think, oh, look, that would do exactly what I want, but it's not up to date and it hasn't been updated for a year or two. So that can be frustrating. From the point of view of the library, other challenges we've had, the obvious one is just having staff and time to work on the projects. That's where COVID was great, because we needed to immediately find stuff to do online, and we were already doing this, so that was pretty easy to just continue with it. When we finish things, getting them approved can be a little bit slow at times, just with everything else going on. And we have really, really good rapport with our IT people, but if we want modules added, sometimes that can take a little while too. So we don't have as much control, it's always the way, as we would like in some cases.
We're going to have to stop you there, Molly.
Okay.
There's so much more to talk about here, and
yeah, there is. Cool.
Yeah, it's so exciting for a number of reasons. I think all of us could put our hands up about those ugly legacy websites that, as you say, sort of have attached themselves, or have sort of sit there in the back. But I think the point you raised about those potentially no longer being culturally safe, and having to address that unsafeness is really important. And I think we'll probably have more discussion about that in the chat. So I'd like to thank you so much again for showing us just how achievable this is as well, and also for the mandatory shout out to Tim Sherritt, which is a GoGlam feature. So Molly, I'll invite you into our chat where people will no doubt have so many questions, and thanks you again.
Thank you.